The weight of a lie on the scene. A madman held a serrated hunting knife to the girl's throat, her pale blue dress stained a frantic crimson. "I want your gun," he shrieked, his voice cracking with a jagged edge. The girl's eyes were wide, glazed with the dull sheen of the dying. The hostage negotiator was shouting from the perimeter, a desperate roar about protocol and never surrendering a sidearm. But I saw the tip of the blade sink deeper into her skin. "Fine, you get it," I barked. I pulled my piece and laid it on the pavement. He snatched it up, his face splitting into a jagged, yellow-toothed grin. He pressed the muzzle hard against the girl's temple. "Go to hell." He pulled the trigger, squelch. It wasn't a gunshot. It was the pathetic sound of a fountain. A thin, weak stream of water sprayed across the girl's face. The world went dead silent. I moved. It took 4.8 seconds to neutralize him. I picked up the gun that was still weeping water, a high-fidelity training squirt gun, its serial number an exact match for my service weapon. My blood turned to ice. Someone had swapped my piece. Someone wanted me dead. And this life-saving toy in my hand felt as heavy as a death sentence. 7:05 a.m. Delta Precinct, New Orleans Police Department. The moment the radio exploded, I was draining the last of a cup of cold chicory coffee. It was a leftover from a night before, sitting in a thermos until it tasted like burnt dirt and regret. Outside the window, the dawn was just breaking, the city not yet fully awake, but the precinct never truly slept. "All units, we have a 10 to 90 in progress at West Side Commercial Bank. Suspect is erratic, armed with a knife. Hostage has been injured. Negotiators and SWAT are en route." The dispatcher's voice was tight, punctuated by the static of a city on the edge. I crushed the paper cup. Instinct took over. My right hand swiped the fingerprint scanner on the lockbox beneath my desk while my left grabbed my keys. My black Glock 19 sat silently in its foam groove, its slide gleaming coldly under the flickering fluorescent lights. No time. Normally, I'd take 30 seconds for a function check. Magazine seated, chamber clear, mechanical smooth. It was a ritual hammered into my marrow since the first day of the academy. But Captain Miller's voice was already booming over the comms. "Thorne, you're the closest. Get in there and stabilize the scene. Backup is 10 minutes out." "Copy that." I barked into my shoulder mic, my hand already wrapping around the grip. The feel of it. It felt light. I froze for a heartbeat. But my brain immediately overruled the doubt, just nerves. I carried this gun for 3 years. Its weight was part of my muscle memory. 29 ounces, loaded with 15 rounds of 9mm hollow points. It was supposed to be an extension of my arm. I'd skipped breakfast. I was running on 3 hours of sleep after grinding through cold case files. My senses were off. That had to be it. More importantly, there was no time. I holstered the weapon without checking the mag. I checked it before locking it up last night. I felt the familiar tug of the leather holster against my hip as the retention clip clicked into place. Elias. Marcus Hayes appeared in the doorway, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. His expression was off, somewhere between jitters and anticipation. "That West Side call. You going in solo?" "Backup's coming. I'm just hitting point." I brushed past him, adjusting my jacket. The hallway lights hummed with a sick electric buzz. "Watch your back," Marcus called out behind me, his voice dropping an octave. Word is there might be more than one of them. I glanced back. Marcus was looking everywhere, but at me, his right hand nervously rubbing the watch on his left wrist, a tell I'd known for 5 years. "Where do you hear that?" I asked. "Just chatter on the patrol band," he said vaguely, taking a sip of coffee. "Just keep your eyes open." I didn't have time to process it. I hit the elevator, my hand instinctively resting on the holster. That feeling of lightness returned. It wasn't a glaring difference, more like a subtle imbalance, like wearing a pair of boots you've had for years, but suddenly noticing a new insole. I shook it off. Impossible. The lockbox was fingerprint-coated. I was the last one out of the office at 11:47 p.m. I tore out of the parking garage in my battered black sedan. No sirens yet. I didn't want to spook the rabbit. 7:08 a.m. I hit the morning rush. The city was a gridlock of steel and frustration. I navigated the gaps with one hand on the wheel and the other pressing against the Glock. Every touch deepened the discord in my gut. At a red light, I made a choice. Once I hit the scene, if I had a spare 10 seconds, I'd check the mag. But reality doesn't give you 10 seconds. 7:12 a.m. I arrived at a nightmare. The sidewalk in front of West Side Commercial Bank was a chaotic mess. The yellow tape was barely up, and a crowd was already pressing against the line. In the center of the clearing stood a man built like an ox, wearing grease-stained dickies, his left arm clamped like a vice around a young woman's neck. She couldn't have been more than 22, wearing a light blue sundress that was now soaked in a spreading shadow of dark red. The man held a hunting knife with a 10-inch blade. The tip was buried in the soft skin of her throat. Her face was the color of ash, her lips turning a bruised purple from the lack of air. She was trembling, a rhythmic, violent shaking like a leaf caught in a gale. "Police! I want the cops!" the gunman screamed. "One more step, and I open her up. I swear to God. I'm the police!" I shouted, hands held high as I eased forward. "Easy. Let's talk about this." I stopped 25 feet away. I could see the sweat on his brow, the blown-out pupils, either meth or pure, unadulterated psychosis. I could also see the blood. It was pulsing, not spraying. The carotid was intact for now, but one twitch of his wrist would end her story. "Just you," he hissed, his eyes darting. "Just me," I said, my voice a practiced, low-frequency calm. "Loosen the grip, man. She can't breathe." The girl's breath was a wet, ragged hitching sound. "Back up. 5 steps," he shrieked. I obeyed. My peripheral vision mapped the area. Bank doors locked, planters to the left, concrete bollards to the right. No clean shot for a sniper, no cover within 40 feet. "I want a gun," he suddenly roared. "Give me your piece. Now." My heart hit the floor. Rule number 1, you never give up your weapon. "I can't do that. But we can talk money. We can talk a car. Whatever you need." "I want the gun." He twisted his wrist. The blade carved a fresh line in her neck. The girl let out a muffled, strangled scream, her eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying, absolute trust. She believed I was going to save her. Wait. My brain was redlining. I had 6 minutes until SWAT arrived. She didn't have 6 minutes. "Okay, you get the gun. Just don't hurt her." A negotiator had arrived on my flank, a tall, lanky guy I recognized from the precinct. "Thorne, don't do it. Everyone back off," the gunman yelled, tucking himself behind the girl, using her like a human shield. "I'm counting to 3. 1. There is no more time for calculus. I'm giving it to you," I yelled. My hand went to my holster. In that moment, the lightness of the weapon felt like a scream in my palm. The sinking feeling, my fingers hesitated on the grip for half a heartbeat. A negligible amount of time in a vacuum, but a lifetime when a girl is bleeding out in front of you. I gritted my teeth and drew. The black metal caught the morning sun. It looked exactly like my Glock, the wear on the grip, the faint scratch on the slide from a fence jump last year, the tiny nick on the trigger guard. Even the serial number, Glock 19 DP 0715. It was my gun. It had to be. On the ground. "Kick it over." I moved in slow motion. I knelt, my knees popping in the silence, and placed the pistol on the concrete. I gave a gentle nudge with my toe. It slid across the rough pavement with a dry, rasping sound, stopping 3 feet from his boots. "Now, back up to the tape." I retreated, my eyes never leaving his hands. He reached down and grabbed the gun with his offhand, his knife hand still trembling against her throat. As his fingers closed around the grip, I saw him frown. He hefted it once. Time froze. If he realized it was a fake, if he felt the weight was off and went into a rage, but he just laughed, a wet, jagged sound. He leveled the muzzle on my chest. There. Now I'm the one with the badge. I tensed every muscle, ready to dive. At 25 feet, I had a 10% chance of survival if he pulled the trigger. I was already calculating the angle to the nearest concrete bollard, but the muzzle shifted. He pressed it into the girl's temple. "Now," he bellowed. "I want an SUV, full tank, 3 million in cash, and you release the Python." Now, the Python, the number 3 in the Copperhead gang, picked up 4 days ago for distribution. This wasn't a random stick-up. My nerves set on fire. This was a play. The negotiator tried to buy time. "We can get the car, but the cash will take an hour, and a prisoner release is impossible." The gunman laughed, shoving the muzzle harder into the girl's head. Her eyes started to roll back. "Then I start the body count. 1 for 1. Wait." I stepped forward. "She's losing too much blood. She's going to die before the car even gets here. Let her go a little." He loosened his arms slightly. The girl slumped, coughing up a red mist. She was held up only by the strength of his grip. The minutes turned into a brutal crawl. 7:23 a.m. A black SUV was brought to the perimeter. 7:31 a.m. The bank manager arrived with 2 duffels, claiming he could only pull one. 5 million from a vault on short notice. 7:38 a.m. The gunman's psyche fractured again. 3 million. Not a cent less. And the Python. "I want him here. We need a court order for a prisoner." "It's not happening today," the negotiator shouted, his voice cracking. "Then she dies." The gunman's face contorted. "I'm counting down. 10, 9. The girl closed her eyes. I could see her lips moving, whispering a word. "Mommy." 8, 7. "Take me instead." I shouted, moving 2 steps closer. Imakop. I'm a better bargaining chip. You can get more for me. The gunman paused. He was weighing the options. A cop was high value, but a cop was dangerous. His eyes flickered between me and the girl. Then, the heavy rumble of an armored bearcat echoed down the street. SWAT had arrived. The gunman's face went purple. You called in the heavies? You think you can take me? It's an ambulance, the negotiator lied, but it was too late. Liars. You're all liars. The man went full psychotic, the veins in his neck bulging like cables. I'll make you watch. He jammed the gun into her temple and pulled the trigger. Time dilated. I saw his knuckle whiten. I saw the trigger move back. I saw the girl's face twist in a final, agonizing terror. I saw Captain Miller leaping from the armored car. I saw a pigeon flare its wings in the sky. Then squelch. No crack of powder. No recoil. Just the sound of a garden hose. A pathetic little stream of water shot out of the barrel, soaking the girl's face. Clear droplets mingled with her blood and tears, sparkling in the dawn. The world stopped. The gunman stared at the gun, his expression shifting from murderous to baffled to a hollow, echoing void of disbelief. He blinked. He pulled the trigger again, squelch. What the? He muttered before his face flushed a deep, bruised plum. A toy? You played me with a toy. I didn't give him another second. In the 0.3 seconds he spent looking at the barrel, I cleared the distance. My left hand caught his knife wrist, my thumb digging into the nerve cluster. He screamed, his fingers spasming open as the blade clattered to the concrete. My right elbow connected with his nose. The sound of breaking cartilage was a sickening crunch in the silence. As he doubled over, I drove a knee into his gut and executed a textbook hip throw, slamming him into the pavement. I felt his head bounce off the concrete. I dropped the knee into the small of his back, wrenched his arms behind him, and the clack-clack of my cuffs was the loudest sound in the world. 4.8 seconds. Clear. I roared, spinning to shield the girl. She was curled in a fetal position, sobbing with a violent, racking intensity. I ripped the hem of my shirt and pressed it against the wound in her neck. Medic! Now! Only then did I look at the gun. It lay on the sidewalk, weeping a small puddle of water. I picked it up. It was laughably light. It was plastic, but the finish was a masterpiece. Matte black paint that mimicked oxidized steel. Even a trigger pull had been weighted to feel real. Serial number Glock 19 DP 0715 was engraved deep, but the number 7 had a microscopic casting flaw that my real weapon didn't have. A high-fidelity training squirt gun. My blood felt like it had been replaced with liquid nitrogen. If the gunman had checked it immediately, if he'd used the knife instead of the gun for the execution, if he hadn't wasted time gloating, the what-ifs exploded in my head. Thorne, Captain Miller stormed over, looking first at the girl and then at the toy in my hand. His face went from red to white. What the hell is that? My service weapon was swapped. I said, my voice so cold it surprised me. Someone gave me a water gun. Debts and favors. I squeezed the girl's hand, feeling her pulse steady under the pressure of my makeshift bandage. You're going to be fine, I whispered. She shook her head, trying to speak through the blood in her mouth, but the EMTs were already there, lifting her onto the gurney. As they slid her into the rig, she kept her eyes on me, a look so complex it felt like a physical weight. Suddenly, a fleet of black SUVs screeched to a halt at the police line. A man in a tailored charcoal suit practically threw himself out of the lead car, his tie askew, his face a mask of panic. I recognized him immediately. Major Robert Sterling. Elena, he screamed, lunging toward the ambulance, but the doors were already locking. He turned to us, his voice trembling. Where is she? Where's my daughter? She's headed to Oxnard Health, Mr. Mayor, Miller said, stepping in. The wound is superficial. She's going to make it. Sterling took a jagged breath, forcing himself to steady. Then he turned to me. His eyes moved from my face down to the water gun I was still holding. You the officer? Detective Elias Thorne, Delta Precinct. Your gun is a toy. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir, I said, standing straight. My weapon was tampered with. I didn't catch it before the call. That's on me. Sterling stood silent for 3 seconds. In that silence, I heard the city breathing. Then he stepped forward and gripped my shoulder. His hand was massive, his grip like iron. If that gun had been real, the suspect would have blown her brains out, he said, his voice a low vibration. You saved my daughter's life, detective. I won't forget that. The mayor's entourage swept him away. The scene began to break down, but the suspect, as he was being hauled into the back of a cruiser, kept mumbling. They told me it was real. They said I'd have the power. They lied. Miller pulled me behind a van and lit a cigarette, his hand shaking. Who is they, Thorne? This smells like a setup. I know. I said, finally letting my own hands tremble. I lit one of my own. Someone wanted me disgraced. If I'd handed over a real gun and she died, I'm in prison. If the gunman realized it was a fake and killed her, I'm in prison. Either way, Elias Thorne is erased. Internal Affairs is going to crawl up your tail, Miller said, exhaling a plume of smoke. Until they finish the sweep, you're on administrative leave. Turn in your badge, and, well, I guess you don't have a gun to turn in. Back at the precinct, the atmosphere was toxic. People looked at me like I was a ghost or a leper. Marcus Hayes walked toward me, a stack of folders in his hand. I heard about the piece. That's insane, man. You okay? I stared into his eyes. You seemed real interested in my call this morning, Marcus. He blinked, a flicker of something dark crossing his face. Just looking out for a partner. Is that a crime? Not yet, I said, brushing past him, my shoulder hitting his with purposeful force. But the NOPD is real good at finding things. Fingerprints, logs, cameras. The truth always leaks out. I spent a week in the dark. I replayed that morning 1,000 times. The lockbox was secure, but the office was common ground. Swapping the gun required a window of opportunity. Someone who knew I'd be taking a high-stakes call, and someone who knew I was too tired to do a full check. Marcus had borrowed my pen the day before. He'd held it for an hour. High-res photos of fingerprints can be used to make a silicone mold. It was a black market trick, but Marcus had gambling debts. $50,000 to a Copperhead bookie. On Monday, the chief of police, Arthur Graham, called me in. His office was a shrine to old-school law enforcement. Swan, seat. He slid a file across the desk. 2 things. First, the lab report on the squirt gun came back. It's a custom job, meant to mimic your Glock's weight perfectly, if you were distracted. IA ruled it gross negligence on your part, but the mayor stepped in. Since the negligence actually saved his daughter, the charges are dropped. I opened the file. The red cleared stamp felt like a hollow victory. Second, Graham leaned back. The mayor wants you promoted. He's pushing for you to take the commander slot for the Delta precinct. I froze. That's a big jump, Chief. It's a political jump, Graham said bluntly. But you need a win to silence the critics. People think you got lucky. The Copperheads have been moving a lot of weight lately. They're looking to fill the void since we grabbed the python. You break their back in the next month, and the commander's bars are yours. You fail. I get it. I'm out. Take your new piece. He handed me a fresh Glock. I checked it 3 times, magazine, chamber, striker. It was real. I went to my new office and opened the Copperhead file. They've been running New Orleans for 7 years. My predecessor, Commander Vance, ended up in a hit and run that left him in a coma 6 months ago. The file was full of patterns. Every 3rd Friday, there was a distraction at the port of New Orleans, a fire, a brawl, and every week after, a new shipment of fentanyl hit the streets. This Friday was the 3rd Friday. I handpicked a team, Lee, a forensics geek, Miller, the old-timer, and Maya, a tech wizard. We met in a room with no windows and no electronics. The plan was simple. Slip into the docks, observe, and strike. No patrol alerts. No backup requests. Complete radio silence. Thursday night, I stayed late. The precinct was a tomb. I was mapping the extraction points when I heard a soft footfall. I hid the map and pulled up a random report. Marcus Hayes was at the door. Still grinding? He asked, his eyes scanning my desk. I heard her chasing snakes. Need a hand? I'm good, Marcus. Got it covered. He shrugged, but he didn't leave. He leaned against the filing cabinet. Elias, I know you think I had something to do with the bank. I didn't. We've been partners for a long time. I know you owe 50 grand to a bookie named Vinny, I said, finally looking up. His face drained of color. Vinny runs the Copperhead Street money. I continued. The interest is up to 80 now, isn't it? They're squeezing you. You're investigating me? His voice was thin. I'm a cop, I said. I looked at your bank statements. Small, frequent transfers. Your wife bought a new Gucci bag last week on your secondary card. Where'd that money come from, Marcus? He stood there for 5 seconds, then turned and walked out. The click of the door sounded like a hammer falling on an empty chamber. The rat on the walls. I pulled a digital recorder out of my drawer and hit play. The audio was clear, Marcus's voice on his cell in the hallway, right after he left my room. He's on the docks. Friday night. I'll have him there on time. Where's my money? Fine, the usual spot. I popped the SD card and tucked it in my vest. I had the rat, but I didn't want just the rat. I wanted the cage. Friday night, 10:00 p.m. Port of New Orleans. The air was thick with the smell of salt and diesel. A heavy fog rolled off the Mississippi, turning the lights of distant tankers into ghostly orbs. The docks were a graveyard of rusted shipping containers. My team was tucked into the shadows of Warehouse 3. We'd been there for 2 hours. Boss, we still holding? Lee whispered. Wait, I said. At 10:15, the power to the sector died. Total blackout. Minutes later, 3 unmarked vans slid into the lot, running without headlights. Figures in black began offloading crates. It was too quiet, no shouting, no clatter, just the rhythmic shhh of cardboard on wood. Ready, I started, but my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Trap. Get out. I signaled to hold. Almost instantly, massive floodlights, powered by independent generators, erupted from 3 directions, bathing the warehouse in a blinding, artificial noon. If we had moved, we would have been caught in the crosshairs. And then I saw it, the glint of glass on the rooftops. Snipers. At least 2. Fall back, I hissed. Disperse. Meeting point Delta. As we scrambled into the labyrinth of the container yard, the night exploded behind us. Not at us, but at the warehouse. A rival crew, likely the West Side Boys, started a firefight with the Copperheads. Gangva? Miller grunted as we reached the perimeter. No, I said, checking the rooftops through my thermals. A setup. If we'd moved in, we'd be the ones in the middle of a 2-way slaughter. Let's get back to the precinct. The next morning, I called a briefing. Marcus was there, looking like he'd been dragged behind a car. He was 5 minutes late, smelling of stale bourbon. You all heard about the docks, I said, pacing in front of the whiteboard. The op was leaked. Someone set a kill zone. 2 snipers had the approach covered. Marcus's throat hitched. Everyone in the room was looking at him. Only 10 people knew the plan, I said, stopping behind Marcus. Marcus, you came to my office the other night. You heard the details, didn't you? I just caught a few things. I hit the remote on the projector. A graining CCTV image appeared. The entrance to the Blue Room, a jazz club downtown. Then why did you go straight from my office to meet Vinny the Scar Miller? The image was sharp. 11:23 p.m. Marcus and Vinny, the Copperheads bagman, talking on the sidewalk. The room went cold. 2 IA officers stepped through the back door. Marcus tried to stand, his chair screeching against the floor. You track me? Facial recognition, Marcus. 97% match. I leaned in. Give me your badge and your gun. He collapsed back into the chair, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. He handed them over. As I let him out, he leaned toward me. You have no idea who you're messing with, Elias. The Copperheads are just the street. The real weight is upstairs. You're already dead. I picked up his gun. A real Glock 19. Loaded. Clean. But it wouldn't be real for long. Marcus was held for 48 hours. His lawyer was a shark, and the evidence was circumstantial. Meeting a mobster isn't a crime, and he claimed the phone call was about a private loan. He was released on suspension, pending investigation. During those 48 hours, I did 3 things. First, I got a custom-made training squirt gun. I weighted it, painted it, and etched Marcus's serial number into the frame. I even added a tiny flaw to the number 8. Second, I had a locksmith make a copy of Marcus's locker and home keys from the spares in the precinct's master set. Third, I set a domestic disturbance trap. I had 2 undercover officers stage a violent fight in an abandoned factory in the lower ninth. The call went to dispatch and was assigned to Marcus for his reinstatement shift, a mercy move I'd supposedly lobbied for. Why am I back on patrol so fast? Marcus asked me at the locker room door. He looked haunted. We're short-handed, and you're a veteran, I said, not blinking. Unless you don't want the work? He watched me for a long time. Then, the desperation for a paycheck won. I'll do it. I watched him go. I knew he wouldn't check his gun. He was too eager to prove himself, and he still believed the precinct was his sanctuary. 10:40 p.m. The Blue Room. I sat in the shadows of the alleyway, the smell of trash and old beer thick in the air. I was waiting for Marcus and Vinny. My informant said Vinny was coming to collect. Marcus appeared first, looking frantic. He kept checking his watch. At 10:50, Vinny the Scar rolled up in a black Cadillac. Where's the money? Vinny asked, his voice a gravelly rasp. The dock hit failed. Thorne survived. He's got IA on me. That's your problem, Vinny said, pulling a silenced pistol and pressing it into Marcus's gut. The Copperheads don't do refunds. Either you give us Thorne on a silver platter by Tuesday, or I start sending pieces of your wife to the precinct. Choose. Marcus was shaking. His hand moved to his holster. He gripped the handle. I can't, Marcus whispered. Then you die now. I stepped out of the shadows, my phone recording. Police. Drop it. Cold water and hard truths. Vinny spun, firing 2 shots toward me. They hissed past my head, thudding into the brick wall. I returned fire, 1 shot catching Vinny in the shoulder. He grunted and bolted into the dark. Marcus, seeing his chance to erase the witness to his treason, drew his weapon. He leveled it at my back with a trembling, two-handed grip. He pulled the trigger. Squelch. The little stream of water hit my tactical vest. Marcus froze. He pulled it again, squelch. He stared at the gun, his face shifting from murderous intent to a hollow, soul-deep terror. He realized he'd been played with his own deck. I turned and tackled him before he could run. I slammed him into a fire hydrant and clicked the cuffs shut. Stay. I chased Vinny. He had disappeared into a dead-end alley, but the blood trail led to a brick wall. I found a loose brick, the hidden lever. A section of the wall slid back, revealing a narrow staircase smelling of chemicals and rot. At the bottom was a basement the size of a ballroom. Crates of food supplies were stacked to the ceiling. I pried one open. Pure fentanyl. Hundreds of kilos. I took photos, grabbed samples, and slipped back out, sealing the door behind me. Marcus was still weeping against the hydrant when the sirens arrived. Now, you want to talk? I asked, holding up the squirt gun. I'm a dead man either way, he sobbed. Not if you give me the names upstairs. The interrogation lasted until 4:00 a.m. Marcus broke. He told me about the gambling, the threats, and the swap. He'd used a silicone mold of my thumbprint to open my box. He didn't know who provided the water gun. It had appeared in his locker with a note. But then he said it. Vance wasn't a hit-and-run Elias. He was poisoned before the crash. He was looking at the Chief's bank records. My heart skipped. Chief Graham. 3 days later, based on Marcus's testimony and the warehouse find, we dismantled the Copperhead gang. 37 arrests. 100 million in narcotics seized. I led the raid, and for some reason, there was no resistance. It was as if someone had decided the Copperheads were no longer useful. The promotion ceremony was held in the City Hall ballroom. Mayor Sterling was there, beaming. This department has faced a shadow, Sterling told the press. But Detective Thorne brought the light. It is my honor to appoint him as the new commander of the Delta Precinct. The applause was deafening. Graham stood on stage with me, shaking my hand, a perfect practice smile on his face. Good job, Commander. I looked into his eyes. I saw the abyss. I went back to my new office. The squirt gun sat in a glass display case on my shelf, right next to my commendation. It was a reminder. Your enemies are usually behind you, and the most ridiculous things can save your life. My phone buzzed. A text from Elena Sterling. Congratulations, Commander. My father says you're a hero. Are you free this weekend? I'd like to thank you properly. I replied, just doing my job. I should be free. I looked out at the New Orleans skyline. The city was beautiful, but the rot went all the way to the foundation. My story started with a toy gun, but the real war was just beginning. Marcus was right about one thing. The Copperheads were just the street. The real snakes wore suits and badges. I locked my drawer, my real Glock heavy on my hip. The mist was rising off the river. I stepped out into the night. I was ready. My gun was real, my badge was new, and I was coming for every last one of them. Story complete.